Hey guys, welcome back to the shop. Tonight's video is going to be fairly quick, but we're going to talk a little bit about a front-end conversion that I'm working on. If you were a subscriber to the channel, you might have seen a video pop up this morning that was a walkthrough of the shop that I did last night. It was requested by a guy on Reddit in our bike builders. It's a very long video. It's like 45 minutes long. I didn't intend for it to take quite that long, but sometimes I got a little carried away. So go check that out if you're curious about the shop, want to see the tools I use, that kind of thing. So without further ado, let's take a look at the H2. So these are the original forks off of the H2, and I have the steering stem over in the vise. They're not, I guess they're not terrible. They're just very basic forks, very old school. Right side up forks. If you remember in one of the earlier videos, I talked about this bike only has one brake caliper, one brake rotor. There are kits that you can get to put a second rotor on and a second caliper, but even then, it's just a very old style of caliper, not very effective brakes, and I wanted something a little bit better. So rather than mess with the stock front suspension, I think I'm going to wind up just swapping front ends on this bike. A buddy of mine over in Colorway has a Gixxer 600 that needed fork seals, and rather than try and replace a fork seal and make a big mess and all that, he just swapped a different front end on. So I went and picked up his front end for fairly cheap, and what do you know, it fits. It actually fits surprisingly well. The steering stem on this is the exact same diameter as the original H2 steering stem. Everything clears. I'm probably actually going to wind up with a different set of forks. These are pretty beat, and there's a broken tab on one side, but whatever, it was cheap. Something to mock up with at least. Anyhow, so yeah, this is I think this is probably going to be the front end on this bike. There's been a little bit of discussion in my thread on caferacer.net that it may be a bad idea, but that's only really come from one guy. I'm not disputing it. I don't profess to be a motorcycle designer or suspension engineer or anything like that, but I did some measurements. Of course, I'm not changing the rake on this. Well, I guess not intentionally anyway. I'll have to take some measurements and everything and make sure it's within acceptable limits, but I'm not changing the angle or doing anything like that. The length is almost identical, so trail should stay right about the same, and I'll have some room to go up and down on the triple clamps to adjust it if necessary. But yeah, my whole goal here is really to get better brakes on the front of this bike. Now, a good point that a lot of people bring up is, and I have to put the camera down for a minute here. H2 frames are not known for being rigid frames. They were floppy in the 70s, and 40 years hasn't really been kind to them. There's actually a diagram, if I remember, I'll put it up here. That shows some factory some bracing you can do to the factory frame to improve it. I think it was put out by Denko years ago. One of the guys on caferacer.net pointed this out. Deals a lot with reinforcing this area of the head tube, maybe putting a cross brace in here, and I think there's some bracing down here and a couple other places that it suggests. The problem with that is not that I couldn't do it, it's that this is an H2. And like I said in an early video, it might not be a numbers matching bike, but that doesn't mean down the road that somebody else won't want to restore it, or maybe I'll get a wild hair and want to put it back to stock. Once you start cutting on this frame and adding stuff to it, welding on it, the value seems to drop like a rock. So yeah, it's not great. Yeah, better brakes might just make the frame feel crappier. I don't know. I'll try it. Because worst case scenario to me, if I put it on there and the front end just completely overwhelms the frame, then I'm not having to cut or change anything, and I can just put that stuff back on. But yeah, I think this is going to get a semi-modern front end. Out back, I haven't really decided yet. There's a lot of guys that reinforce this swing arm. Pull this out. Yeah, there's a lot of guys that reinforce this swing arm. It's kind of crap as it is. The other thing is, there's no bearings on here. It's just a bushing. This actually moved like almost a ½ an inch side to side. So that's not good. I'm going to look into at least converting this over to bearings on the back, and maybe adding, because you know I can get a replacement swing arm fairly easily. There's a couple people that have kind of added some bracing under here to give it a little more stiffness, so that's an option as well. Last thing I might look into is swapping out the rear wheel. I would love to get rid of the drum, just because, I mean, no joke, this thing probably weighs, I mean, that's a solid 45 pounds, somewhere in there, maybe 40, but that's a lot of weight. Guy on CafeRacer.net had a great idea for a rear wheel with a drum that would essentially bolt on. That's kind of cool, because then I can retain the stock brake actuator and all that. If I swap to a hydraulic, I would have to find a way to mount a master cylinder on this frame, which wouldn't be that hard, but again, it's welding on this frame, which I'm just not sure that's something I want to do. So yeah, I'll try and keep this a little shorter. We're about 6 minutes now. I know, like I said, I can ramble on all night, and I kind of did that in the shop tour video, so I'll try and avoid doing that tonight. But yeah, looking forward to this and get some bearings ordered up. I actually did find a salvage place just over the mountain from me that, excuse me, that has just a warehouse full of front end stuff. So you know, I may not wind up going with the Gixxer 600. You know, maybe a 750 or maybe a Honda front end or something else. There's a bunch of options out there. So I will keep you posted and let you know where we go from here. Anyway, till next time, see y'all.